This video is going to be about creating an animated door using a timeline to open a door using the interaction system and interfaces that we've built in previous videos. I'm going to start by creating a new blueprint actor called BP Animated Door. The animated door is going to need a cube to represent the door. This cube is 1 meter in all directions, so I'm going to first of all reduce it to 10 centimeters thick, which is still a pretty thick door. I want it to be 2 meters wide and 3 meters tall. These are specific distances because if we leave it as it is at the moment, any rotations and animations we play to it will rotate it around its center point, which is not what I want to do. So now that I know how high it is, I can offset it by 150 centimeters in the z-axis and by 100 centimeters in the y-axis. And now if I rotate this door, it will rotate around the scene root here, giving me a nice smooth opening animation. We'll show you what that looks like once I've built it. Head over to the event graph, and the first thing we're going to do is implement the interface, the blueprint interface that we set up before. This will allow the player to walk up to the door, press their interact key and open the door. With the interface implemented, compile, save the blueprint, and you want to find your try interaction event. So this will be called by the player walking up to it and their line trace colliding with this door and triggering the event. The event itself is going to trigger an animation based on a timeline. So let's add a timeline. A timeline is a remotely running curve which we can use to drive an interpolation event. So I'm just going to call this the door anim timeline. And before we edit the animation timeline, let's set up the logic which will control the opening and closing of the door. I'm going to create a custom event and call this open door. And that's going to just play the animation forwards. I'm going to create a second custom event. That's going to be called close door. And this will play the animation in reverse. So if it's all the way open, you can play the closed door animation to close it. If it's all the way shut, you can use the open door animation to open it. And if it's somewhere in between the two and you call this, it will simply play back from where it is. So this should create a nice robust door which the player can mess around with. But before you call these events, we're going to need a little bit of logic to work out whether the door is open or closed. So create a new variable. This is going to be called isOpen. Get a reference to the isOpen variable, and it's going to start false. I don't want the door to start open. Here's our branch. And so if the door is open, then we want to close it. So if the door is true, if it is open, close door. And if the door is not open, then we want to open door. So our logic is set up here. However, this will still only work once. We need to set the Boolean value to represent these new inputs that the player has chosen. So I'm just going to shift these over a little bit and set the value of our Boolean here. So if the door is open, then we're going to set it to false. Sorry, if the door is open, we want to set it to false, so it's now going to be closed, and then close the door. Whereas if the door is not open, we're going to set that to true. We're going to open the door. Sorry. So if it is open, that's true. We set the isOpen to false and we close it. Whereas if open is false, we set isOpen to true because we're about to open it. So that should control the backwards and forwards animation of the door. Now let's open up the timeline itself. Double click on it and you'll be taken into a new a tab inside the blueprint for the timeline. It currently has no event track going on inside it, so let's add a new track. Make this a float track, and I'm just going to call this door anim track. Currently it's set to 5 seconds. This is default. I think that's going to be a very, very slow opening door if it takes 5 seconds to open, so I'm just going to reduce that to 2 seconds. And then here's your graph. It now ranges from 0 to 2 seconds. Right click, add a new key, right click and add a new key. I'm going to set these two keys by left clicking and selecting around them. And the first one is going to start at 0 seconds with a value of 0, and the final one is going to end at 2 seconds with a value of 1. It ranges from 0 to 1 over the 2-second duration. We'll be able to use this curve, well, straight line, to drive a linear interpolation. Speaking of the interpolation, let's use it. Here is that door animation track. So as this timeline plays, this value will output a number between 0 and 1, which is perfect for a linear interpolation. In this case, we're going to be rotating the door, so I want the lerp rotator node, which you can find by right-clicking and typing in lerp and then rot for rotator. Yeah. So it's going to start from A. This is the door's origin point. That's going to be closed, and I'm going to leave that exactly as it is. And B is going to represent the open position, which is just going to be a 90-degree rotation in the Z-axis. The alpha is the door animation track. So this will handle that rotation for us. The output is going to be set actor rotation, because we're going to be rotating the whole door actor itself. And with that set up, we should now be able to walk up to the door and interact with it. Let's place one in the level. Play, walk up to the door, press my interaction key. The interact line trace hits the door, triggers the timeline, and opens the door. And if we hit it whilst it's in the middle of the two, we just call the other event and we reverse that timeline, so the door doesn't get stuck either.